I think what's important is especially some of these very rich countries like Dubai, Qatar, Norway, right, who are just sitting on enormous amounts of money. For them to say, we're going to start investing some of our national money into Bitcoin, that's really significant, and that really could happen. That could happen this year. I think it will happen this year. I think we are going to see Dubai or somebody like that, right, announce, yeah, we own, we own 100,000 Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like, that would not surprise me at all. Getting back to these places like UAE or Dubai, I feel like these guys are smart, right? They're smart long-term players, so they may not do it immediately, but I do think they're absolutely looking at it, and I do think it will happen. If I had to put a guess, I would say that that'll be the first people to kind of take a significant position in this stuff. And also, look, we saw that the Saudi quit the PetroDollar contract, so they can sell their oil and whatever. They're no longer so aligned with the U.S. as they used to be.
Bing bong. I am back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast, where I've got the man, the myth, the legend, Fred Krueger, who has become very well known for putting out the power law of seeing Bitcoin at $1 million a coin. But Fred, with all of the volume getting pumped into the ETFs, I got to ask you, do you think that that's undershooting it now that Bitcoin has seemingly become Wall Street's favorite asset?
Well, you say undershooting it. I mean, it could go higher eventually. I like to put a time frame on the estimate, which is, I think, 10 years. In the next 10 years is kind of what I'm interested in. If you look at 20, 30 years, who knows? Everything could go a lot higher. But I think in the next 10 years, the question is, what's reasonable to expect Bitcoin to do over the next 10 years? And I would say $1 million a coin would be kind of, it's an optimistic target still, but I think we can get there.
Yeah, and you have a background in Wall Street and kind of in that realm. So now that you're seeing Bitcoin spot ETFs, 11 of them being launched in the U.S., are you surprised by seeing the reaction of everybody, the amount of money that's being dumped into these products, or did you think that this was kind of anticipated?
It definitely wasn't anticipated. This is more inflows than anybody expected. I expected that we would have potentially this much, but even I'm, pleasantly surprised. I would say that it's on the high side of even my expectations. The thing I wasn't expecting so much was a lot of the GBTC selling and OG selling into this thing. So there's a lot of new buyers, but there's a lot of sellers too. A lot of people are not really, they're taking profit here.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because we're seeing, hedge funds and institutions are kind of at an impasse here, where institutions are very long buying the ETF and buying, Bitcoin, and we'll get into that in a minute. But we're seeing hedge funds, rapidly short Bitcoin and the spot ETF products. Now, how are you reading into that? Do you think that the shorts are just massively kind of in a sense, keeping the price down, and that's maybe why we're not seeing the net run up that we might see when this?
No, I don't think it's a lot of shorts. So there are people who are using the futures to hedge, but they're basically going long cash, short futures. So it's a hedged position. It's not like they're net short Bitcoin. So I don't believe that there's just this massive. I don't think there's $10 billion of short bets on Bitcoin. I do not think that that's the case. Okay. I think we are looking at, I think we're looking at a bunch of people who have this trade on, and they're long cash, short futures. I think there is some miners selling right now, and so that's a separate thing. But I think the miners are selling as is kind of normal for this thing. Let me just mute. Yeah, so that's kind of what I think is the thing. I think the miners are the people who are selling the most, and they may be using futures to sell, right? Because they're selling not only the inventory of coin that they have, but they're selling also inventory that they're going to mine over the next 6 months to a year. They have some visibility as to what they're going to mine, so they can short, they can sell futures against it. So that's really, and because they're under cash pressure, they're under pressure to come to make money, to monetize their business. So especially with the halving being only 3 months behind us now. I don't think there is a lot of just people betting against Bitcoin. I think there are profit takers right now who are, people who bought last cycle or earlier, and they're taking profit. And I think there are the miners are forced sellers. So that's kind of what I think is going on.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? I mean, I heard an interview with you and Luke Mikic where you were describing, there's not been really very many Saylor lookalikes, right? But, I want to make the argument here that we're seeing some pop up, maybe not necessarily Michael Saylor's at that entire level, but we're seeing a lot of institutions start to buy Bitcoin and put it on their balance sheet, right? I mean, DeFi Technologies just announced it on June 10th, so a few days ago. We've had not only DeFi Technologies, but we've had some other companies that are coming in, and their stock price tripled since then. We've seen Semlar Scientific, and then we've also seen not only that, we've seen Metaplanet as well. And, with all that being said, granted, DeFi Technologies only bought 110 Bitcoin. And so for an institution or for a company, that is not a significant amount of money at all. But I think the encouraging part is that we're seeing companies start to do that and put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Now, do you think this is going to be a continuing trend? And do you think that this will kind of help, I guess, shoot Bitcoin up even more than anticipated, because more and more companies are going to try to emulate the MicroStrategy strategy?
I don't think that's going to be meaningful. I think MicroStrategy is in a league of its own. They've been trying to sort of push this to they've been trying to clone themselves for a while, right? It really hasn't worked. You had Tesla bought some Bitcoin, they sold it. It's difficult to get through for a corporate board to do that. So you've got a lot of these little micro caps like Metaplanet and so on. I'm supportive of this. It's a great idea, but these are not. It's 2 or 3 orders of magnitude less than MicroStrategy. It's not going to be that significant. What's significant is just this wall of money that the institutions have that they still have not allocated to Bitcoin, right? So there's so much more money out there on the ETFs that it's just not moving yet, right? And why is it not moving? Is a lot of these guys now they can invest, but they're still nervous. Right? If you're a fund manager and you invest 10% of your fund in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin somehow goes down to 40,000, you might lose your job. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of where everybody's sort of playing it safe a little bit. And, I think we need to break out to new highs. We need to get more upside momentum. And then I think people, the greed motivation work sets in, which is just another form of fear. It's fear of missing out, right? So once you get FOMO coming back into the market, there's a ton of money. It's not like there's not any money. There's tons of money. So I think that's a good thing, and that's how to expect this thing. It's not going to go up. It won't buy the dip. This is not dip buying money. This is FOMO money. This is money that we get to 100,000. All this new money will be like, oh yeah, let me get in, right? And so that's new because up until now, we kind of had exhausted the venture capital money and that kind of money. There's only so much venture capital money, and it's not really particularly interested in Bitcoin. It's really, that money went into Axie Infinity and a bunch of other VC-backed coins, right? And then there was a bunch of yield money that went into Terra Luna and Celsius and stuff. But there's not a ton of there's not a ton of supplies of money that could go into like Coinbase custody Bitcoin, right? And so we're in this new world where we've got this new source of money. The new source of money is 100 times bigger than the old source of money. But the new source of money is not completely sold yet on Bitcoin, at all. Like it's still a little nervous. It's still like, yeah, maybe we'll get a little tiny bit of this thing. That's kind of where we are with this money. And it's going to take a little time for them to feel comfortable, dipping their toe further into this asset. And it's a question of nobody wants to be the first person in the pool. It's like you're at a barbecue, right? And there's a pool, everybody's in their swim trunks, but nobody wants to be the first person to jump in that pool, right? Once there's 2 or 3 people in that pool, you don't want to be the guy standing on the outside of that pool either. You want to jump in, right? So, there's this sort of little bit follow the Joneses mentality. And, this thing is only 5 months old, 6 months old, right? So these guys still do not have, they really, there's no track record yet. There's this track record before ETFs, but the big money doesn't care about that. It's not, that doesn't count. The only thing that counts is the track record of the ETFs. That's the only thing that counts for that. So, that's 5 months old.
Now, with all that being said, right, you kind of talk about like FOMO money coming in, which I think is like an interesting topic here, because we've hit the all-time high before the halving. And we did see a lot of money getting dumped into it. But do you think like that all-time high of like 70, 71, 72K is not exactly as, I guess, as enticing as maybe like the 100K mark, where that's where we'll start to see a lot more of that FOMO money coming in? Do you think that 100K mark is just like a mental barrier?
I think it's significant, right? I think what we need to do is we need to go convincingly above 70,000, right? Because look, we were here, back in 2000, January of 2001, we're at very much these levels, right? So, if you're looking at this from an institutional point of view, part of you says, well, maybe this is the top, right? Maybe we're in this range of, 10,000 to 60,000, and we're at the top of the range, and we're not going to go any further, right? So I could spin this narrative that way pretty easily. And, if I'm some guy at some random fund, I've thought about Bitcoin for about 10 minutes, that seems possible to me, so I'm a little worried about investing at 70,000. I'm less worried if the thing breaks out to 100,000. Now I'm sort of going, okay, yeah, I'm going to get on board this train. This train's leaving the station. I'm getting on board, right? Right now, it's not completely compelling, for these, FOMO type investors, I think. But I think the fact that they have the capability does mean that all we have to do is convincingly break out. And this is like, in the Fast and the Furious, when the guy hits the nitro button, you know what I mean? That's what I think that's the analogy that I would put, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, what do you think that then is the biggest driver of adoption? Do you think it's more of like nation states adopting it? Do you think it's institutions putting it on their balance sheet? Do you think it's, the people kind of retailers scooping up the spot ETF? Like, what do you think is going to be the next driver here? Because there's so many things happening for Bitcoin right now that seem to be very, very positive. But we're seemingly like crab walking. I mean, I know we do this kind of like every cycle for the price, every halving, we kind of see it crab walk through the summer. And then towards the end of the year, we start to see it shoot up. But I feel like we're just like a giant balloon that we're putting under, or a beach ball under the water. And we're just waiting to see that shoot up.
Well, here's the thing. I would be careful about reading too much in from previous cycles. Okay. because this.
Are you looking for the best way to store your seed phrase? Well, I've got it for you. It's Stampseed. They've got the #1 punch place where you can order a full-on package where they've got every single thing. They've got all the letters. You could just get it in there. And they've got this sick hammer, which they've engineered to make it so easy for you to punch in that titanium steel plate and store your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. So go ahead and get your Bitcoin off of these exchanges and use promo code Green Candle for 15% off. They're helping power the show. They've got the Bitcoin logo. You can punch it into your seed phrase as well. If you could see it here, they've got a lot of cool stuff. And now I'm helping empower you to get your Bitcoin off an exchange utilizing Stampseed and storing your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. Now get to it. All right, back to the show.
This cycle is very different. We have a completely new set of investors for this cycle as we have for the other cycles, right? So Matt Haugen from Bitwise made the comment in a space that I was in, and I retweeted it, that basically, if you look at kind of where money is in America, right? You have 20% is controlled by individual investors. 40% is controlled by people who manage money for other people, right? So it's managed money. And then 40% is like institutions like pension funds and, insurance companies, people like that, right? So are pension funds and insurance companies buying Bitcoin? Almost zero right now. Zero, right? Okay. And it's been way too difficult for them to do. Are people who manage money for other people buying Bitcoin? Very little right now, almost zero, right? So that's 80% of the market. How about individual investors? Well, now some of them are, right? And some of them could do that before, but they'd have to go establish a Coinbase account, which is, for you and me, it's not that difficult, but for a lot of people it is. They don't really want to do it. They don't trust something like Coinbase. They don't trust self-custody. So I think we're looking at maybe 10x the market as before. So it's a completely different market. It's a market that doesn't know anything about this asset for the most part. It's completely new, right? And they have now 6 months of being exposed to the asset. So, I don't think that it's exactly the same as these guys have been looking at it for years and years and years, and it's the balloon under the water that's just going to pop. I think they're discovering the asset for the very first time, and so I think that's it's a different thing. Now, it's going to take a little longer, but the amount of money is so much bigger, right? So all it's going to take is, you think Sailor's big? Well, there's hundreds of Sailors out there, in corporate America, right? And in managed money. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars that are sitting there, right? Trillions of dollars, right? Not billions. So there's so much money that I think this cycle and this market could be very different than all previous cycles. It could last much longer. It doesn't have to end in 4 years. It doesn't mean like we have 2 good years and then we're going to crash. It could be 6 years. It could be a long period, right? And it could behave somewhat differently, right? I'm very, very bullish, but I just think this is different. And I think it's a different group of people. It's more people who are, especially if you talk about institutions, right? They're not buying and selling. They're not panic selling. They're going to put something on their balance sheet. They're not going to look at it for another year or two. You know what I mean? They're not going to do much. It's going to be hard for them to put it on their balance sheet, right? But once they do, they're just going to leave it there. That's just what they do, right? So I think it's a lot stickier money that we're going to see, but I just don't think we've even seen the beginning of it yet. I think this is just the appetizer, and I think we're going to sort of, we're going to start on kind of the entree maybe this fall, hopefully. But I think that the amount of money is so big that, once we don't need anything new, we just need these existing players now to start going, okay, yeah, all right, let's, I'm an insurance company like Chubb, let me take in $5 billion worth of Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Not a crazy number, for a big insurance company, to do. So, and in total, there's been $15 billion of net inflows right now. Right. So, but I'm just saying, like, one big insurance company could take several $1 billion, So we have the capability of these guys coming in. We also have the capability of sovereigns and wealth funds, right, to come in. And so I think all of this stuff, the big money has arrived, but the big money has arrived, but it's not sort of chomping at the bit quite yet. But it's there, and it now can chomp at the bit. So, when it happens, it could happen pretty quickly. I'm not saying it'll be very slow, but I wouldn't read too much into what's happening today or this week or this month. It sort of doesn't matter. I think what will interest me is if we can see some bigger names come up to the plate in terms of institutions, in terms of funds, and take bigger positions. Because I feel right now what everybody's done is they've taken the absolute minimum that they can to say that they have a position. Right. So 50% of all these hedge funds have invested in Bitcoin. Right. 50% of all hedge funds have some form of Bitcoin investment, but it's very small. Right. So they have 0.5% of Bitcoin, something like that. Now, they're just dipping their toe in the water. They're not even up to the ankles yet. They're just literally like, water feels good. But they're not in the pool. They're not jumping out. They're not telling their friends to jump in the pool. It's very early from their perspective. So from our perspective, we've been in this space for a while, and so we're like, hey, when are these guys jumping in? But from their perspective, it's new. And so everybody's got their own viewpoint on this space. And I think, but when it does happen, it could be explosive too. So I think, the thing you learn about being a Bitcoiner is you're in it you cannot predict when these moves will really happen. And especially now with this new money that's coming in, I don't think you can predict when this stuff's really going to happen. But I can tell you that I'm pretty convinced it's going to happen.
Yeah, the timing seems to be tough, but yeah, I mean, it seems like it's just a matter of time at this point where it's, so much money coming in. But it's interesting because, when I try to orange pill people, I always say, put like a percent of what your portfolio would be in there. So it seems like that's what kind of the hedge funds are doing right now, or at least how you're describing it is like they're putting 1%, maybe 0.5% of their portfolio in it. And then, maybe during this cycle, we'll see that turn into 5% or, 2%, 3%. They'll see it run up because of the price appreciation. And then they'll start to dump more money. And then, all floodgates are open. So I think
the hedge funds is kind of fast money though, right? So hedge funds is not the kind of money you want in this thing. Because by definition, hedge funds, they're only interested, they're going to buy it, they're going to flip it. Okay. They're not buy and hold. Okay. That's not who you want in this space, right? What you really want is long-term investors, right? And those are institutions, and those are rich people, and then people who manage money for rich people. That's who you want in this space, right? And so those people are not convinced at this point, right? They're not 100. They're watching it, but they're not racing for the exit. They're not exits of fiat, right? They're not stampeding it at all, right? So that's, I think, the best analogy. But they're getting comfortable with it, and it doesn't have to do much. It could go up 20% from here, and that would be in another 3 months or 4 months, and that would be enough that they could say, okay, yeah, I'm convinced now, right? It doesn't need to quadruple or anything like that for them to get it. They just needs a little bit more time, needs to break out to new highs, and they got to hear their buddies at their, country club tell them that it's a great investment. That's it. Like, let's not forget that this country is owned by, the top couple percent, right? That's who owns this country, right? So they're all going to the same country clubs. They're all, their kids go to the same schools. They hang out at the same places, and so it just takes a little bit of time for them to socialize this stuff and to come to a conclusion that, they need to be involved in this asset. They haven't had that amount of time yet, right? And
yeah,
so that's what I think.
Yeah. And then it's been kind of an interesting time as well, right? Because, not only are we seeing that, but, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. So I don't think, any other crypto asset really is, useful to invest in. And I'm honestly kind of surprised that the Ethereum spot ETF got passed. But how are you viewing that? Do you think that that's bullish, bearish? Like, do you think that helps Bitcoin any? Or do you think that that's, a negative because people will be, tempted to go into.
I don't think it's going to be meaningful in terms of money going into it relative to Bitcoin. I mean, I think if you saw a couple $2 billion go into that, it would be a lot. And I think the reason is that, these investors they're more conservative than the most crypto investors that you meet, right? So if you look at, the average crypto investor, well, they might have, even if they are a Bitcoin maxi, they might have not have always been a Bitcoin maxi. They could have, started out by, that being in Solana or something. I don't know, right? And then it takes them a while to come to the conclusion that Bitcoin's probably the best bet. And these other guys, they're not really interested in like studying all these different coins and trying to understand all these different arguments for whatever smart contracts or anything. They're not, they barely have 10 minutes to understand what Bitcoin is. So they understand the idea of, 21 million coins. They get that. And it's the biggest 21 million coins. Okay, I got it. And if you start saying there's this Ethereum, they're like, okay, what is that again? Like, it's hard to wrap your head around what it is. And they just don't have a big attention span. So I think that, explaining these things in an elevator to a guy who's managing $1 billion, and you've got the write up to explain to them what Solana is or Ethereum or NFTs. Like, they're like, what? Okay, no. So they're very skeptical, and I think they're going to be very skeptical for anything else than Bitcoin. I mean, I think that even Bitcoin, that there's a hill to climb, because they're like, this is just funny money, made up internet money. Why should I take it doesn't pay anything. It's all going to go to zero. Okay, so that's where they're starting. But when you start talking about dog coins or something, they're immediately out of there. They have no interest at all. Dog coins or how many transactions per second. They're like, yeah, okay, this is just. I'll ask my son. You know what I mean? That's kind of like. But I'm not. Maybe my son can play around with that, but I'm certainly not putting any of my money in there or my fund's money in there. So I think that's the attitude that most of these people have. So I don't think that Ethereum is going to be wildly popular with the, Tampa Fireman's Fund. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to be memeing into Shiba Inu. You know what I mean? But I could be wrong. I just think that these the first bank of Wichita, Kansas, is not going to be investing in some ordinal or some meme coin or some new layer 2 or something. I just don't see it.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you. And I was kind of hoping you said that as well, because, although we have the Ethereum ETF did pass, like I said, I'm hoping that, people don't really flock to that and kind of get away from the Bitcoin's mission and all that. But I want to kind of flip the script a little bit and go more into nation state adoptions, right? We've obviously seen El Salvador and how successful that's been. Bukele's done an outstanding job flipping that country around. We've had Milei in Argentina start to hint at, dollarizing Argentina as the first step and being more open to Bitcoin. And I imagine, more leaders as they're coming in, right? We're even seeing Donald Trump and Joe Biden start to talk about Bitcoin. And it's becoming, somewhat of a talking point for the presidential election in the U.S. Now, how are you looking at nation state adoption?
I think the most important thing, Brandon, is not like making it legal tender or anything. I think that's not so important. I think what's important is especially some of these very rich countries like Dubai, Qatar, Norway, right? Some of these very rich, energy rich countries who are just sitting on, enormous amounts of money, right? For them to say, we're going to start investing some of our national money into Bitcoin, that's really significant, and that really could happen. That could happen this year. I think it will happen this year. I think we are going to see Dubai or somebody like that, right, announce, yeah, we own, we own 100,000 Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like, that would not surprise me at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting there. I mean, Dubai, the UAE, they're very, Bitcoin and crypto friendly, very like big tax havens. Do you think that that's going to be a bigger talking point here and like the US especially, right? I mean, or do you think the tax man is always going to try to get, a piece of the pie here where, they'll whether it's transacting, buying, selling, that aspect of things, where they might maybe take it a little easier on Bitcoin and crypto to a lesser extent? Or do you think, the recent hire of like 75,000 new IRS agents was more for, forensic accounting and kind of to come after people who have been, kind of trading in the Wild West here with the crypto markets that have kind of recently emerged? Are you looking for the easiest way to get your Bitcoin off an exchange? Well, I've got it for you. It's Foundation Devices. They've got the #1 hardware wallet in the passport. They've even got a concierge service that can help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange within 1 hour private onboarding session. And they've got a great app too, which will give you extremely, extremely, extremely private features on that app, so you can use Bitcoin in the most secure way possible. So I've been working hard trying to get sponsors to help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange, and I found it with Foundation, and you can store your seed phrase with a Stampseed punch plate as well. So pair all those together, use promo code GREENCANDLE at foundation.xyz, and you'll get $10 off your entire order. All right, that's enough for me. Back to the show.
Well, look, the people who do it, most Bitcoiners that I know don't trade very actively, right? So, I think they buy Bitcoin, they hold their Bitcoin as they should, right? But so I don't think they have too much to worry about, because, if you bought Bitcoin, you hold it, you don't have any tax liability. You know what I mean? You have tax liability if you start selling it, but if you just buy Bitcoin and you hold it, guess what? The IRS has nothing. You don't have to report it. There's nothing, right? You happen to bought Bitcoin. Great. There's no law that says you have to report how much Bitcoin you have, right? Now, if you're actively trading it and you're doing all kinds of stuff with it, yeah, sure. And I definitely think the IRS is after that kind of person. I don't think it applies to most Bitcoiners, and I definitely think that I do think that getting back to these places like UAE or Dubai, I feel like these guys are smart, right? They're smart long-term players. They built up Dubai out of nothing, right? 20 years ago, right? It was just sand, right? Now it's this megapolis. I was just there, 5 months ago. It's amazing, right? So they're definitely capable of investing. They're definitely going to make sure that they are 100%, all the families and everything are behind the call. So they may not do it immediately, but I do think they're absolutely looking at it, and I do think it will happen, right? And I think that if I had to put a guess, I would say that part of the world will be the first part. That'll be the first people to kind of take a significant position in this stuff, you know. And also, look, we saw that the Saudi, you know, quit the petrodollar contract, so they can sell their oil and whatever things. So they're no longer so aligned with the U.S. as they used to be, right? And they're under no need to buy U.S. Treasuries with their, you know, with their dollars. So that, just like any other major investor, they're going to look for what's the best possible long-term return, you know. And yeah, they could buy Amazon, they could buy Apple, you know, they could buy Nvidia, or they could buy Bitcoin, or some combination of them, right? But you know, Bitcoin will have to, it'll shoot up on that list regardless, right? If you're looking at this stuff a year from now or 6 months from now, you're going to have an opinion on Bitcoin, right? Because when they're looking at their asset choices, you know, to invest their $1 trillion, that's going to come up. So I think these guys are smart, and I think these guys are going to play. They couldn't play up till now because for them to go and do what MicroStrategy does and custody their own Bitcoin and everything, not easy, right? But now it's simple: buy a bunch of ETFs, and if they want to custody them themselves, you know, they have a lot of options now that didn't even exist a couple of years ago. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned a couple things that I want to dive into there, but the first one was about the BRICS nations, because I've seen a lot on this kind of circulating on Twitter. But from my understanding, there wasn't really an agreement in the first place about the petrodollar agreement. And it's just been kind of like a wild Twitter rumor that's you know, exploded and kind of gone that way. Now, I'm not sure if that which side is true. I need to do more research and kind of figure all that out.
Yeah, I think there was. Okay, so it was a 60-year agreement. Okay, or something like that, maybe 50 years, right? That basically, you know, dates to the 70s, right? And basically, the agreement was we will, you know, we're going to defend you, and we're going to, you know, you're going to be on our, but you're going to agree to market your oil in dollars. And that agreement expired. They didn't pull out. It just expired. Normal expiration, right? And they didn't renew it, right? So they didn't sort of say, okay, we're signing up again for another 20, 30, 50 years, whatever, right? Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to do anything different tomorrow, right? It just means that they're sort of saying, well, great, it was good. We both enjoyed it. It worked out for both of us. But, you know, we're not committing that we won't, you know, price our oil in rubles or in yuan, you know, whatever you want. So, so that's what I think is the status of that agreement.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like I said, I'll have to do more research into it, but
that's my impression of it. I'm not 100%.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I imagine nothing's going to really change like drastically. They're not going to flip everything on its head right away. I mean, that just doesn't really make sense, a 50-year agreement for them to kind of switch up. But there has been kind of like rumblings of the dollar weakening. Now, you know, with seeing the dollar weaken and, you know, the potential underlying concerns of the U.S. economy, I'm curious, like, kind of how you're looking at the overall economy right now, because we've got interest rates, you know, pretty high. We've got inflation, CPI came in at 3.2 this month, you know, beating or for May, beating expectations of 3.3, but it seems to be kind of sticky. The consumer is still somewhat strong, but, you know, it seems to be weakening as well. So, you know, with all this being said, right, we're talking about the power law and Bitcoin's price shooting up, but Bitcoin's never experienced, you know, a bull market in a potential recession or with, you know, underlying concerns in the economy. So how are you looking at this? And does it change your thesis at all, like in the next, you know, 3 to 4 years about Bitcoin?
Well, okay. So the power law has held, you know, which is basically just a statistical observation that, you know, Bitcoin is going up on a log basis, with pretty low volatility. So it's a very good fit, right? And it's held under many different conditions, right? So it's held under very low interest rates, 0% interest rates, and as well as 5% interest rates, right? And it went from, if you look at the history of interest rates for Bitcoin, we went from 0 to about 3, back down to 0, and now back up to 5.5, right? That's kind of where we are. Power law has done fine, right? What about recessions? Well, when Bitcoin started, we were in an absolute recession. Remember, 2009. That was a terrible recession. It was the great financial, recession. And that was really the beginning of Bitcoin, right? So, Bitcoin's done well under every condition. So I wouldn't be too worried about this stuff making a dent really on Bitcoin's long-term behavior. Because I think Bitcoin ultimately is driven by adoption. It's by people who decide to save part of their money in Bitcoin. That's the equation, right? So if we keep on getting more and more people coming into Bitcoin and choosing to save $1,000 of their net worth in Bitcoin price is going to go up. In fact, there's a really high correlation between the number of people who have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin. It's like 98%, right? So, the question is, are we going to get more and more people come in and decide to put $1,000 of their money into Bitcoin? I would say, yeah. So the adoption of Bitcoin is really just a numbers game. More and more people are coming in. More and more people like you and me are discovering this asset. Some of them are richer, some of them are not so rich, but the numbers it's just like a tidal wave of people coming in and finding this asset. And it has some key advantages over other assets, not just that it goes up, but you can hold it yourself, right? You can hold it yourself in a wallet with 24 or 12 words even, right? And you can move it around the world. It's not tied to where you live, So I live in California, but if I decided to move to Dubai, right, tomorrow, I could take my Bitcoin with me, right? No problem, right? I mean, literally, I could hop on a plane and show up in Dubai and rebuild my life in Dubai with all my Bitcoin, right? So it really is this kind of total freedom that it represents, and that's so appealing, So I think the adoption of Bitcoin is going to continue. I think we're going to have, over the next. We're not at all finished. We're just at the very beginning. 1% of the world has any Bitcoin. And so as we get from 1% to 2%, 5%, 10%. More and more people are going to be, start stacking this Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin is going to go up. So I don't think it's going to impact the power law at all. My view of the economy is, listen, I think I think we're in a financialized economy, right? So my overall view is that the only reason the economy works right now is because of printing money. That's the only reason why we're not, not in some major recession, right? So as long as the government continues to print money, as long as the government continues to grow, we're going to be okay, right? So, people can have, people will go out, they'll buy new cars, they'll buy more stuff, as long as their printing of the money continues. But, the printing has gone on, the US debt has increased 55% in the last 4 years, right? So, that tells you kind of like, we're on a path to basically double the entire debt in every 7 years right now. Now, when you do that and you hand out money to people, they'll go spend it. That's what people do, right? I'm not too worried about the economy as long as they keep on printing money. I think it's going to be catastrophic in the end, because we're just creating this pile of monopoly money that really doesn't have a lot of value, right? But, most people do not have a lot of capital. Most people will spend every bit of money that they have. And, that's the average American, right? So if you look at, I kind of had this one graph and I sort of said, what happened during in COVID? Well, it's pretty simple. For the first year of COVID, we all stuck at home, right? And then we bought washing machines and refrigerators because our wives were into nesting, right? So we're all like, okay, we got to nest. We got to be at home all the time. We're going to make the house really great. So we started buying, but we didn't buy new cars during the first year of thing because there was nowhere to go, right? We didn't do a lot of purchases. Then basically we opened up and, during this period, we just started printing money like crazy. So everybody's savings went way up, with the stimulus checks and everything else, the PPP loans. So we've kind of exhausted all that savings. We started spending like crazy. And if you look out, I'm sure where you are, it's probably the same as where I am. The restaurants are completely packed. Everybody's out. Everybody's at, the restaurants because that's kind of what we do. We spend our money. So, I think the money printing has generated spending. So on paper, we're doing great, right? In terms of the debt, we're not doing so great. And that's the problem.
Yeah, that's fair to say, right? The debt just kind of keeps going up, but the consumer is still pretty strong. But I want to pivot again and kind of talk about, bring it back to the power law. You mentioned that a little bit earlier, how it's, kind of going through. How do you looking at, I've heard you in some videos talking about the AMM multiplier effect.
Yeah.
Break that down for us a little bit here and kind of see how you're viewing that, going into this bull run as well. Are you looking for the best way to orange pill your friends and family? Well, I've got a way for you that's got a little bit of a nostalgia factor. I've got Bitcoin trading cards. They've got the Genesis pack. I've got an open pack right here, sitting here, where you can hand out a bunch of these cards with some great artwork. We've got tyranny. We've got fear, uncertainty, and doubt right here, the FUD card. So we've got a lot of great things to teach you a bunch of lessons about Bitcoin in the current space. And they've even got some cool things of cool people even doing some stuff in the Bitcoin space. I've got the Bitcoin racing card here, even signed by my boy, Chris Primetime McKenzie. So you can get all of that at btc-tc.com. Use promo code GreenCandle. You can get 10% off your entire order to orange pill your friends and family and collect some cool artwork of people that are doing some awesome stuff in the Bitcoin space and help spreading that orange pill around the globe. All right, enough from me. Back to the show.
Well, look, I think there's, you can look at Bitcoin has to be bought. Pretty much the supply of Bitcoin is almost fixed at this point, right? We're mining about 450 Bitcoin a day now, right? But it's a very small number. So if somebody's buying Bitcoin, somebody has to sell that Bitcoin to them. Right? So if you look at kind of how much Bitcoin is there on exchanges that could be sold, right? That's if you're going to sell Bitcoin, you're going to move it to an exchange, you're going to sell it, right? Well, there's a little bit under 2 million Bitcoin that's sitting on exchanges, like 1.7, I think, right now, right? Is how much Bitcoin is sitting on exchanges. So, let's just call that, let's call it roughly $100 billion, right? Roughly. And so there's $100 billion worth of Bitcoin that's kind of for sale at different prices, right? It's just sitting on exchange. But there's also another $100 billion of Tether that's sitting on exchanges, right? So if you look at both of those two things together, you have $100 billion of Tether and $100 billion of Bitcoin. Now, if those two things were, in an AMM like Uniswap, right, they would trade on this curve, right? So, hold on one second. I'm just going to get this dog. 1 second. There you go. Sit. So if you were trading on an AMM, there's a certain price performance that's kind of dictated by that AMM. So, I just sort of modeled it as an AMM, and you get you can sort of approximate how much, let's just say a $1 or $2 billion inflow of demand will cause in terms of the overall market cap of Bitcoin, right? And it's something like 50 billion, roughly. That's kind of where the curve tells you, which is sort of like saying there's a multiplier of about 50. So if there's $1 billion of new money coming into Bitcoin, let's say from real estate or from bonds or from something else, it won't cause a $1 billion increase in the market cap of Bitcoin. It'll cause something like somewhere between 30 and 60x that, right? So a lot of people are like, well, how come Bitcoin price is not going up? There's all this money coming in. And the reason it's not is there's also a lot of people selling too, right? And the ETFs are really still only about 5% of the overall, market of Bitcoin, right? So the ETF hold about 5% of the Bitcoin. The other 95% is held by non-ETFs, right? And so it doesn't take that much for some people to start selling to counterbalance the effect of the ETFs, right? So it definitely is the case that, there has been whale selling over the last, since March 15th. There's been a bunch of whales who've sold, and there's a bunch of people track this stuff pretty well. I don't think it means that much because the amount of institutional money that's on the sidelines is so much bigger than even the amount of whales and stuff. But it's just sort of normal, It's sort of like if you bought Bitcoin at $200 and Bitcoin's now close to $70,000, it's tempting to take some off the table, right? It may not be the best move, but it's tempting, right? I get it. So anyway, so that's kind of the AMM multiplier, and that's where I think a lot of people are just confused because they think if the ETFs are buying, it must go up, and sometimes it doesn't go up, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's what we're seeing right now, right? I mean, we're seeing a ton of net inflows into the ETF, so it is kind of surprising. But that explanation there does make sense. I mean, we even saw like 1,200, a little over 1,200 Bitcoin purchased in one day, which is like 28 times the daily inflows. So I mean, with that, just at surface level, right, you would think that the price would shoot up a little bit. I mean, we saw a couple percentage, but
and it does if you average it out, right? But just on a daily or weekly basis, it doesn't, right? So you can come up with a lot of different. If you start looking at this thing in a fine-tooth way, it'll drive you nuts, and you're never going to get it right? Because you're going to be like, okay, why did the Bitcoin price go down today? Like, surely, there's people like, yeah, okay, there's all this. There's the people on Wall Street are only doing one thing, really. They're buying net, right? Now, some days they're having negative inflows, some days, but overall they're buying, right? And so you have this new source of buying pressure coming from Wall Street. And, who are the people selling? Well, it's old whales. That's it, That's pretty much it. And you have the younger cohorts, the people with one Bitcoin and so on, they're growing, right? So it's not kind of universal.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely get that. And I, level with you there, but, you've put out great content for, a while and kind of, gotten into Bitcoin in that way, shape or form, and kind of, started talking about it. And you're one of the greatest voices, I think, put out some great charts and everything like that on Twitter. I'm curious, like kind of, how did you kind of resonate with Bitcoin initially? Was it something, maybe about the fixed supply? Because I mean, obviously it's been a great returning asset, but with the Wall Street background, all that kind of stuff, you kind of have maybe some tendencies to get into it, or at least that's what I'm seeing in the traditional finance space now. So, are you looking for the number one place to find all the information you can about Bitcoin, whether it's price, whether it's hash rate, whether it's the latest up-to-date things outside of Bitcoin, whether it's nation state adoption, what have you? Well, I've got the place for you. check out bitcoinnews.com. They've even got the #1 newsletter in the game when it comes to Bitcoin, because it gives you all the up-to-date information on every single thing that happened in the past week. That'll come to your inbox every single Monday morning. You could sign up using this code right down here or this link. It's also in the show notes. So come join me and thousands of other people that are getting the most up-to-date information from bitcoinnews.com and their newsletter. All right, let's get back to the show.
I would say now, look, I bless my stars that I got into it, because most of my friends still don't get it, right? They still think it's a joke, right? Or they may own a little bit, but they think it's just like kind of like lottery ticket, whatever, right? I think, look, for me, I came into it from other coins initially, right? So I was more interested in, EOS and Ethereum up until 2018 kind of time frame, and then after that sort of first correction, I got for me, right? I wasn't involved in the I wasn't involved in the 2013 bull market at all. But after the 2017 bull market correction, I really that's when I sort of, got interested really in Bitcoin. And so, it was people like Tom Lee from Fundstrat who really kind of convinced me that, the long-term future was pretty bright for Bitcoin. But I think it's not obvious, especially, it's not obvious to really get it, I think, in size. So I think a lot of people, you get a lot of younger people who get it, right? Because they're like, and that sort of was the argument, right? Which is sort of, it's a great asset for millennials, right? Because millennials they don't have money with Schwab, and they might have an account with Robinhood, right? But they don't have accounts with Merrill Lynch so much, right? So they have maybe Robinhood, and they really live on their phones, and and this is an asset where you can, once you understand it, you can kind of take it with you. You can save your own keys. You can use your phone to transact. It's great. And so that's not the way a boomer or Wall Streeter tends to think at all, right? So I think I had to unlearn everything that I knew before to kind of appreciate Bitcoin. Yeah, I had to unlearn a lot of things, and I'd say most people anywhere near my age tend to be very anti-Bitcoin, very anti this kind of space. So, listen, I'm very happy that I kind of stumbled into it and did the work and got the religion, But I think you can get it. It's just, there's 100 reasons why you're not going to get it. And, you can easily get convinced that, well, Solana is so much faster and cheaper and a better user experience, right? A lot of people think like that, right? And that kind of thinking has generally worked for most technological investments, right? Facebook was better, faster than MySpace, and it won, right? Google was better than Yahoo, and it won. So there's a lot of examples like that in tech where the newer, better, faster, cheaper thing won. And so I think you have to really be careful, because I think there's a lot of traps where your thinking is like, yeah, it's not going to work. And I think Bitcoin you really have to unlearn a bunch of stuff, because I think it is different from anything else that you'll ever see in your entire life. And it's a miracle that it worked, even, it's just an absolute miracle that it worked. And, and I think for me, I'm very passionate about it, because, I do think that it's probably the most significant invention that I've seen in my life. And I don't mean it just in terms of making me money, right? I just think in terms of the potential of this thing to really change the world is enormous, right? Because, let's look at some of the other things that changed the world. The internet. The internet did change the world. I couldn't be on this call without the internet with you, right? But, the internet didn't change the power structure of the world, right? We still had money printing and, debt and all the problems with fiat since 1971, right? That's way before the internet, right? And, so I think the question is, can Bitcoin really change that? Can it change the entire power structure of the world, right? And, I think it can, right? So I think it could really it has the potential to change the world economics, right? Because we're talking about a hard money that can be transported with you and that nobody can take. Well, if that really comes to pass and really that becomes the normal thing, right? Well, that's going to change everything. That's going to change everything because right now our entire system works by this money printer. And there's this actually great movie that I just discovered online. It's called Hard Money. I'll put a link to it in your comments when you post this. But this guy did a great job of it's a documentary. But it's, it really is, if you look back over the last 40, 50 years, we've just been living on this money printer kind of world. And you forget how important this money printer is, but it really is the basis of everything. Right? It's the basis of the entire world order. It's based on the industrial military complex, the war machine, just everything, right? So, if we can get rid of that by having cryptographic money, well then, yeah, I mean, that's amazing, right? That's going to completely and utterly change the world. And if we don't have that, I think we are completely doomed, right? Because I think this money printer thing is just going to blow up, right? It will absolutely, it's going to end in just complete chaos like Venezuela or Argentina or the Soviet Union. I really think that our economic system right now is not sustainable, and all you have to do is go look at the collapse of the Soviet Union, in 1989, right? That was the second most powerful country on the planet, right? And it completely and utterly collapsed, and the reason it collapsed is that socialism does not work. You can't run a country by sort of handpicking which companies are going to win and having these corrupt leaders. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so, we realize that now. Socialism doesn't work, but we have this new kind of monetary socialism now, right? So that's kind of what we have now. And, if you're close to the money printer and you're, got some program that's going to benefit from the money printer, you're personally going to do very well. But if you're not close to the money printer, you're going to get screwed right now. And, it's not just the rich. The rich don't necessarily will not benefit. The people who are rich and close to the money printer will benefit, right? And so I think, I just think that we're in a really bad situation if we don't have crypto right now. So I really do think that this is almost like, it's not just a great thing like the iPhone, is a great thing. But, I could live without an iPhone, but like, if we don't have a functioning economy, well, life's not going to be very good at all. It's going to be pretty bad, right? Go to the average Argentina, Venezuela, Lebanon, Turkey, Soviet Union. We have plenty of examples of what this thing looks like when it doesn't work, right? And so, you sort of say, well, the U.S. couldn't be Argentina. I think the U.S. could be Argentina, right? So the U.S. could be Argentina, and we're actually on kind of that kind of path. It may take us 20 or 30 years to get there. But if we don't clean up our act economically and politically, that's the direction we're going. So, I really do think that Bitcoin is part of that solution. That's why, I think it's worth preaching, not just telling people go do it, you'll be good, but do it. It's good for the world, right? Like this is the right way forward, is hard money, Bitcoin, and kick the politicians out or change it so that they'll accept this, and the people who are kind of trying to criminalize all this, we need to kick those people out, so it's kind of my view politically of where we are. But I really have this view that we're in a very dangerous situation with respect to, and really, I don't want to say it's a Democrat versus a Republican thing. We have a problem that, fiat spending is just out of control right now. It's just out of control, right? And we're, the implication of that is that Bitcoin's going to do very well versus fiat, right? So, in a way, it's good for us Bitcoiners, right? Because we can just watch while the whole thing burns, right? But the thing is burning, right? There's a fire going on in this economy, and it's burning, and it's not. No amount of AI or anything else is going to save us from this fire, because we're, unfortunately, the house is not in great shape right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, fix the money, fix the world, right? I mean, that's the mantra. But Fred, you've been very generous with your time, so I really appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell people where they can find you and what else you got going on?
Yeah, so where you can find me is on my Twitter, .Krueger. I have a YouTube also. You can find it on the Twitter. And then what else I got going on? I got a book that's coming out, which is going to be absolutely amazing. It's a coffee table book. It's like an art book, and it's very visual. So instead of just a bunch of words and arguments, it's really, I wanted to tell the story of Bitcoin visually. So it's the most beautiful thing you will ever see. It is 11 by 11 inches by 11 inches, oversized, 300 pages, linen cover, beautiful graphics. Everything is custom charts. I've spared no expense. Not going to be cheap, but it's not going to be cheap to build either. I mean, I'm not making any money on this thing, but it's going to be this limited edition of 1,000 copies. So in a couple of weeks, I'll put a link and you can sort of see what it looks like. But, we've interviewed a lot of the founders of cryptography and all the stuff that led up to Bitcoin. Just yesterday, for example, we were talking to the person who invented private keys, just to give you an example. So, he's still alive. He's 80 years old, and, he was, he was like, he's at Stanford, and then it's like, Fred got a PhD at Stanford. He said, oh, let me check it out. So yeah. So, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to putting this closure on this thing, and, there'll be an online version you can look at, but it really is intended for, it's just like, we love Bitcoin. So I wanted to have something that we could actually hold, that had, kind of the story, the people, and it sort of bookended with the four halvings, right? So I wanted to just say, okay, this is the first 15 years of Bitcoin. So that's what I've been doing. I'm looking forward to kind of taking a little break from doing stuff. It's been an enormous effort, but thanks a lot for having me on, and I'll definitely try to plug my book inside of your Twitter feed. And,
yeah, of course.
So we want to get this thing out and tell the story, because a lot of people don't know. They don't understand where Bitcoin came from. what are the ideas that came? So we've taken a very kind of chronological, historical perspective. Like, what role did Nick Szabo have in the role? What did Wei Dai? Who is Wei Dai? How are these guys related? What did Hal Finney do? So we dug up and we've kind of traced the entire DNA, and then we also categorize it through the first bull market, or how did Bitcoin work as in the first couple years? What was that like? So we've done a lot of work. So anyway, so that's that. And so thanks again, Brandon.
Of course. Yeah. And I'll have to plug all that when it comes out, and I'll have to get myself a copy. You got me all.
You'll see it. It's so beautiful. Like, we got this guy, our designer, who's a Bitcoiner, he found me on he's like, Fred, I just got to be part of this project. And he's like, I'm like, okay, look, I can pay some in Bitcoin. And so we got this guy, and he's put in over 100 hours of just design time. From what I and my partner, Ben, the design partner, Ben, on this book. So we put in hundreds of hours of research and design and stuff. So it's going to be an amazing book, and very unlike anything you've ever seen. It's just a beautiful thing, and it's going to be I just feel like it's something that you're going to tell your wife or your girlfriend, or maybe you buy it for somebody that is a Bitcoiner. It could be a great gift. And we're just going to do 1,000 of them. That's it. It's one edition, 1,000. Everyone's numbered. That's it. Yeah, kind of like Bitcoin. There
we go.
Finite. So, anyways, that's the goal.
I love it.
I'm basically trying to do nothing other than not sell my Bitcoin. That's my goal.
Amen to that. So I'll plug all that if it's out by the time the episode comes out. If not, I'll be getting one, and I'll be promoting Fred's book when it comes out. So be on the lookout for that. Follow him on Twitter and on YouTube. He does great stuff. And thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this great episode. If you enjoyed this one and you want some more content, click on the link right here and check out my latest interview with Tom Luongo. We get into it all. If you've known Tom, he's a wild one, so stay tuned. And if you found some value in this podcast, please smash that like button, hit that subscribe button so you get notified of the next videos. All right, I'll catch you at the next one.